as you heard, I carry many labels. Mathematician, mother, textile artist, writer, brain injury survivor. But like all of us, we all have labels, but none of them define us. I mean, if you define someone through their label, you're dehumanizing them in some ways. I mean, for instance, well, actually, there's a story. I grew up in Israel, and during the civil war in Lebanon, it was the Shiites against the Sunnis, and they'd have roadblocks, and they'd hold up a tomato and they'd say, "What is this?" And if you pronounced it the wrong way, you'd get gunned down. So that's very much, the issue of a label. Sunni, you're the wrong one. Shia, that kind of thing. So basically, how do we move past the labels? Through our stories. So it's really important to tell our stories and listen to other people's stories. So you said I'm a mother. Still true. The thing is, I'm not going to elaborate a lot on it. My kids are in their 20s now. One lives in Cranberry, the other in Florida. I could keep going about my kids, but I won't. Mathematician. I started my undergraduate degrees from Israel. It's in aeronautical engineering, but then I came here for my PhD in mathematics. Got it at Carnegie Mellon University, and then so now I'm a professor there, and have been for way too long. And then textile artist. I've been interested in textiles. I guess it started when I was 7 years old, when my mother taught me knitting, and then it went on from there. I learned to embroider and sew in school. And then when as an adult, I learned to spin yarn and weave and various felting. When I think of textile techniques, I'd like to think that I tried them all, but I know that I haven't tried quilting, so I can't say that. Now, when it comes to textile traditions, that also got interested in it since I was a kid. At home, we were always surrounded by ethnic textiles. My parents loved ethnic textiles, and growing up in Israel, you've got the Druze village 20 minutes away. You go visit Jerusalem, the old city. You get, Palestinian textiles. I mean, they're readily available. So our house was always filled with various things scattered throughout the house. And my father used to travel a lot, so he always used to bring things home, like saris from India, embroidery from Hungary, all sorts of. So they were always there. So it's in the blood. And then, so growing up in Israel, I went through, I don't remember how many wars, 4 or 5 wars. Now, I didn't live in a war zone. There weren't any bullets flying around, but it's really very much part of life there. I had a boyfriend whose leg was blown off. My brother was wounded in the war in Lebanon. I mean, it's really very much part of life. And you don't realize when you're there just how stressful it is. It's just how it is. But then you leave, and suddenly there's this, and you don't realize it until you're outside the country. And when I came here, when I was 24 years old, I had that same feeling. But then 9/11 happened. And as for, like everyone who was around then, it hit hard. And with my experience, many people's automatic reaction was to throw money at it to solve the problem, but it really doesn't solve it long term. Our best weapon against war is education. And I wanted to do something. I didn't know what exactly. I knew it wasn't about money. It was something to do with education. But I was still thinking about it. And then I came across an ad in in a weaving magazine for an organization called WARP, which is an acronym for Weave a Real Peace. Two words jumped out at me, weave and peace. As a weaver, I couldn't resist it. Peace was certainly what, I was interested in that. So I looked more into it, and I found it's a networking organization. The mission is to, well, one of the things is to improve the quality of life amongst textile artisans and communities in need. And when you do that, so through it, what happens, you empower the women. I mean, it's mostly women who are the textile artisans in most places, not so much in, depends where. In some places in Africa, it's not, it's the men who do the weaving. But also the women, when they're doing better financially, they're the one, they tend to want to improve the quality of life of their kids and make education more accessible to their kids. So it leads into the sort of thing that I was interested in. So again, it was a clear thing for me. So I joined. And then a couple of years after I joined, well, the members there consists of anthropologists, textile aficionados, makers like me, what else? Activists, various doers, really strong women, and amazing women. They have annual meetings, and it's just amazing. I mean, the stuff that happens. Some of them work in the field, creating co-ops for these groups, and it's just an incredible atmosphere. And we listen to each other's stories. It's a networking organization, and that brings about so many interesting things. You know, there'll be a woman from one co-op who'll say, "Oh, I did this," and the other one will go, "Wait, how did you do that?" You know, it's really incredible stuff. So, a couple of years after I joined, well, I was a board member, then I became president at one point. I started writing a regular column, Textile Techniques Around the World, for our quarterly newsletter. The editor asked me to write this. I jumped on it, A, because of my interest, and B, it gave me a great excuse to buy books about textiles. And then later on, at a board meeting, the board suggested that we put together these articles and get some photos from WARP members who've been in the field, and then put it together into a booklet and sell it as a fundraiser to the WARP membership. Except then there was a bit of a plot twist. I suffered some brain bleeds. I have clusters of malformed blood vessels in my brain, and 2 of them bled, and the only way to prevent further bleeds with this kind of thing is to remove them surgically. So I underwent 3 brain surgeries, and you can probably imagine that recovery from that is kind of interesting, shall we say. And so for instance, the first 2 years were a nightmare. But along the way, you know, I suffered many losses, but boy, there are a lot of gains. And I will say the gains far outweigh the losses. Life is harder, but it's much fuller. I see things in, I guess, more brilliantly. I'll say that I used to live life in pastels, and now I see it in color. And it's not just about the life-changing experience thing. I mean, there's actually this physiological thing that I have issues with processing sensory input. So a lot of things come in, I mean, now it's much better, but a lot of things come in with equal value, whether it's someone whispering versus someone speaking in my ear. I mean, that's somewhat of a simplification, but it's that sort of idea. So what happens is my brain overloads, and I have trouble, I can't categorize things. And so it overloads, my neurons start going into a traffic jam, and I have ended up having meltdowns and things like that. So I mean, it's the sort of thing, a lot of people with autism have similar issues. But on the other hand, you notice more details. So I remember when my son was a toddler, when he first discovered snow, I remember him sticking his finger into a snowbank and then looking at it melt on his finger and just looking at it like that. And I found myself doing the exact same thing. So you're rediscovering the world, but you're aware of rediscovering it, versus a toddler who's discovering it and doesn't realize the wonder of doing that. I became a much more authentic version of myself. More passion, more compassion. Couple things that really impacted on my life I struggled to get back into the classroom, so I had to relearn the material, starting from relearning multiplication tables through calculus and beyond. And so I struggled through this stuff, I went through books chapter by chapter, exercise by exercise. And the other thing, so I became more empathetic towards students who were struggling. I mean, until then, it came easy to me. And as much as I thought I was empathizing, I didn't really get it. And then the other thing that happened was, because my sequential thinking was damaged, I had to learn my way around that. Your brain rewires. And I came to appreciate different styles of thinking. So I came better able to address that in the classroom. And another thing was, I had to take a crash course in asking for help. It was tough for me because I was used to being this fiercely independent woman. And then here I am having to expose my vulnerabilities. But I very quickly learned that when you expose your weaknesses, you're turning them into strengths. Because if you open yourself up to the world will open to you, because people feel much more comfortable opening up to someone who's comfortable, opening their mouths and blurting everything they have. And some of it is. Then the other thing, so I became a much better teacher, and I used to enjoy teaching. Now it's one of my passions. I absolutely love it. And then the other thing that happened is I was writing these articles on textile techniques, but they were fairly dry. And then after I got back from hospital, I felt really lost. And there wasn't anything out there to really help me figure out what I should do next. I didn't have much guidance from doctors. I was basically stranded. And so I looked at books, I looked at online, and there really wasn't something I needed, which was anecdotes from brain injury survivors on how to live with brain injury. I mean, most of the stuff focuses on the trauma and acute recovery. There's nothing about life with brain injury. So I decided I'll start writing something myself, and I'll bumble along and write, and hopefully it'll help me. And at the same time, I would through this, I would be helping family members understand what's going on. And I thought, okay, and it could also help other brain injury survivors. If there's nothing out there, maybe I could provide it. But as time went on, I realized that I want to reach a broader audience. And we've all had contact with brain injury survivors, whether we know it or not. And to understand, to empathize, it's not easy if you don't know anything about it. So in order to do that, I needed to learn to write better. And I couldn't attend workshops because of the brain injury. So I ended up hiring a writing coach she's an amazing teacher. She became a close friend through this as well. Writing about the recovery I ended up with the book about the memoir, which I'm proud of. Came out last year. Then the other thing that happened was my articles shifted focus. Yes, I was still interested in the techniques, but I was interested in the people and the stories behind the techniques. I became a storyteller, and they became more engaging. And so with the passion and compassion and all that, I also became more vested in warp. And this whole project of slapping together a bunch of articles and putting amateur photography there just didn't seem enough. So I started rewriting and expanding the articles, and it turned into this big project, which you've seen the book, and I'm really proud of that one.
Oh.
Well, I'm proud of both of them. And while I wrote it, I realized that there's more to it than telling stories. That there's some messages there. Textiles are important. They're integral to humanity. We all wear textiles, at least maybe some don't. I don't want to think about that. And textile traditions connect us, past to present. They form ties with each other. Basically, in many ways, textiles embody there's no them, there's us. And so textile traditions are important, and we need to nurture it. For instance, for textile artisans around the world, we need to provide them a market. If they just continue the way they were, they couldn't earn a living. It's impossible. So we need to help them by providing a market. The younger generation is moving away from the traditions for various reasons, including that textile techniques are very laborious, and if you don't get much for it, why should they stay there? And with more access to education, they have other opportunities out there. So, as I said, some friends of mine have formed co-ops, some organizations have formed workshops to teach the younger generation techniques that are more cost effective, this kind of thing. So, it's a good idea to nurture them. I think it's important for us as human beings. When I sit at my loom, I daydream a lot. I'm sitting there, it's very rhythmic. And I think in terms of my connection to other weavers in the past, in the present, in other places in the world. It really does. It's really weird. I was amazed when I realized that. So a friend of mine mentioned that she found a tattoo somewhere with a saying that really spoke to me. Spin a yarn, weave a tale, be your own story.
You should have that needle pointed below or cross stitch.
Yeah.